Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join me in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in the music world in conversations about shaping your journey. Today, I have the great pleasure of having one of my all-time great friends and inspiration, Gregg Bissonette. I was going to say Ringo Starr, but he's the drums behind Ringo Starr when he's touring. And don't forget to subscribe and get news about what we're doing next in this weekly and some surprises in this weekly podcast. Gregg, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're on tour with Ringo right now, and thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Aldo, I always love talking to you. We share so many things. You know, we love music, we love our drumming, and we love to laugh. And I think laughing is something that can just lift people up so much. Even if you meet someone that you've never met, for the first time, laughter is so important. And so I want to start by letting you know that, and all the viewers know that I spent the morning at the Canadian Embassy. Tim Hortons, love my Tim Hortons. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, but I do a lot of caffeine, and caffeine is great. So I was at the Canadian Embassy drinking a lot of caffeine.
Yes, and I remember, I also know you're an espresso fanatic, as I am. And I remember when you were at Kosa, and one of the first things you would ask is, I know Aldo has his machine somewhere in there that can, and of course, it's personally delivered.
You delivered me the most potent espresso many times, and that just, really gets me going. I love espresso. Love it.
Yes. Before we get into the conversation of shaping your journey, would you tell us a little bit of your background, like going back, just to contextualize, and then we can take it from there?
Sure. Well, I'll go back to my great-great-grandfather that came from the south of France. From south of Paris. I don't remember the little area, but south of Paris to Montreal, where we are right now, and then to Ontario, Canada, and then into Michigan, into Detroit, where I was born. And that's my dad's side is French. My mom's side is English and Scottish. My dad's side's French and Irish and Dutch. My mom's side is English and Scottish. And I moved out to Los Angeles after going to college in Denton, Texas, north of Dallas. I went to North Texas State. I remember a conversation at the dinner table, Aldo, in 1977. I'm 63. And when I was graduating, I said, I want to go to school in Texas, and I'm going to be a performance major. And I remember my dad saying, why do you need to be a performance major? You're already performing. You're playing with my band. My dad had a band, a jazz band in Detroit, and my mom played jazz vibes in the band. And my brother played bass, and I have a musical sister also. She works for the company that runs Coachella out in LA. Anyway, he said, why don't you get a degree instead of a degree that says you can perform? You don't show up at a gig and say, here's my degree, can't wait to get the gig. He said, if you don't make enough money playing, you could do what the tenor sax player in my jazz band does. I said, what does he do? And he said, well, he's a middle school band director. And I said, why middle school? He said, well, in high school in America, you need to do the football games, and you need to do summer, marching band, and you need to stay after and do the weekend. But middle school, there's no football games, and you lock your door at 3:00 on a Friday. You don't go back in till 8:00 in the morning on a Monday. You have the summers off. You can do jazz cruises around the world. And I thought, okay, so I got a music education degree. I knew I wanted to move to Los Angeles, and my dream was to play with Montreal's own Maynard Ferguson. Well, my brother got the gig playing with Maynard first, and then I got the gig playing drums, and that was in '82. And Maynard was just the greatest leader, and I'm a hack trumpet player. I love to play trumpet. Ringo lets me play a yellow trumpet. I painted one of my trumpets yellow on Yellow Submarine every day. Ba 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 da da ba da da ba 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 da ba da. He says, "Can you do that standing up?" And I thought, yeah, because when on the album when Ringo says, "And the band begins to play," it's just bass drum, ba 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 ba. But so I said I could stand up. So I play my bass drum, boom, ba 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 ba. But and it's so much fun every night. But anyway, I moved to LA and then got the gig with Maynard to join my brother, and that was in '82. And then after that, Matt and I both stayed in Los Angeles. We said, we want to be, this is the quote we used, recording session touring musicians. Now, a lot of people in Texas, in North Texas State, they said, well, you can't do both. You can't be a session musician and a touring musician. You either have to do one or the other. If you're on tour and they call for a session and you can't make it, they'll move on to the next person. If you're doing a session, you can't go on the road. And I said, well, what about people like Steve Gadd? Steve Gadd tours a lot. James Taylor, Paul Simon, Chuck Mangione back in the day, but he also does a lot of recording. Oh, well, okay. What about Jeff Porcaro? He's in a band called Toto. They tour all the time, but he does a lot of recording. Well, I guess so. So anyway, that was what my dream was back then and what my dream still is now, to be a Los Angeles touring and recording session musician. But if I could, Aldo, I'd like to kind of give you a little more timeline on that. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
after the Maynard tour, that was a year, 2 years for my brother. I started doing a lot of recording sessions in LA and doing different tours. I worked with Tanya Maria, who's a great singer, piano player. She's so great. And then Gino Vanelli, another Montreal artist. When I think about those nights in Montreal, Brother to Brother, one of my favorite albums ever. Mark Craney on drums, played with Gino
Graham
Vanelli.
Lear was the original drummer in that one.
Graham Lear, Casey Sherrill, Mark Craney, Enzo Tedesco. Gino himself plays some drums. And so, yeah, what a great lineage of musicians with Gino Vanelli. But after Gino, I got the gig with David Lee Roth. And I remember coming up to Montreal and playing. And I'm a big hockey fan. Growing up in Detroit, I saw the Beatles play. My dad got tickets, and my brother and my dad and I went to see the Beatles where the Detroit Red Wings play hockey on the ice, number 9, Gordie Howe. And I really love that new Japanese guy on the Montreal team. Do you know the Japanese hockey player?
I
His
don't
name is,
know this.
I think his name is Ichiro Hishutsu. Every time he's in front of the net, they say, he shoots, he scores. He shoots, he scores again. He shoots, he scores. It's a bad joke. Anyway, I don't think there's a Japanese hockey player in the NHL. But anyway, after David Lee Roth, I remember my prayers. My prayers would be, please, Lord, help me get a gig. Help me get the Maynard Ferguson gig. I love Maynard. I love the big band. I love the lineage, from Randy Jones to Danny D'Imperio, Peter Erskine. I want to play with Maynard Ferguson. And the good Lord got me in there he gave me the talent and he gave me the wherewithal to I want to tell drummers out there, all musicians, that there's the talent and there's the pie. And the pie is kind of split in the middle. You can have the talent and you can practice, but you got to have the other side of the pie, which is do you like people? Are you somebody that can go on the road and be in a tour bus? Do you get along with people? Because the other side of the pie is people skills. Nobody wants somebody in their band that doesn't like people. And all these gigs, Maynard Ferguson, David Lee Roth, Ringo, Gino Vanelli, they're all gigs are people gigs. So that pie is split down the middle. So anyway, that was my prayer, to get the Maynard gig. And then I thought, God, help me get a gig where I'm not labeled as a jazz big band guy only. I want to play rock and roll. I love old Van Halen with David Lee Roth. I love Journey, Genesis. And God sent me down that path and I got the gig. It's a long story, but with David Lee Roth. And then I'm such a Beatle fan. The Beatles are my favorite band. And I prayed about that. Lord, help me get a gig that doesn't tour all year round, but it really is a great touring gig like Ringo. And Sheila E. was the drummer before I was. And before Sheila, it was Simon Kirke from Bad Company and Free. Before Simon Kirke, it was Ringo's son, Zach Starkey, who plays with The Who. And that's another whole story, how I got the gig with Ringo.
How did you get the gig?
Well, I was sitting at home in 2003 and my phone rang at midnight. And it was Ringo's producer, but he was calling to ask me. I didn't really know him that well. He says, hey, our engineer, Bruce Sugar, recommended you. We are doing a Steven Tyler, the singer from Aerosmith album, and he doesn't like the drum machine on this shuffle. Can you get down to my studio in Santa Monica, which is about 40 minutes away, and do a shuffle, a rock shuffle? And I said, yeah, I'll be there 10 a.m. tomorrow. How's that? And he said, we need you now. And I said, now? Wow, it's midnight. He said, well, I just finished producing Ringo's 4th album that he had done. And he said, Mark Hudson is his name. He said, you can play on Ringo's drums if you get here right now. They're still set up. Man, I'll be right there. And I bolted down. And Aldo, I thought, instead of doing what we usually do on recording sessions, which is for the engineer, play bass drum, boom, boom, while they're getting sounds, snare drum for 5 minutes, rack tom, floor tom. I said, I'm just going to play kind of a medley of my favorite Ringo grooves, and they'll hear all the drums, all the cymbals. But I went, dum, dum, come together. I did, Ticket to Ride. I did the drum solo in the end. I did Tomorrow Never Knows. And I did all these different groups. And he came into the room. He said, man, I've heard you were a Ringo fanatic, but you really love Ringo. I said, he's my favorite drummer. My dad, Bud Bissonette, and Ringo are the reasons I play the drums. And he said, well, if his son, Zach, can't do this next tour, because he might be doing a thing with The Who, then you got the gig in a band called Ringo and the Roundheads. The Roundheads were the ones that beheaded King Charles back in the day. Now there's a new King Charles, but they took over. They were like a youth gang in London. And so he called it Ringo and the Roundheads in 2003. And he said, does your brother have a Hofner bass? And I said, absolutely. He's got a Hofner bass. He said, well, then you guys will get the gig. And he got us the gig. And that was 2003. And then in 2005, I remember Ringo saying, I'd love to have you in the All-Star band too. I love playing double drums with you, but you got to have a couple of hits that you sang. And I said, well, that's never going to happen. Well, in 2008, Ringo's attorney manager called and said, Ringo says he really wants you in the All-Star band. And so I've been in his All-Star band since 2008, 14 years. What an honor and a blessing. And now we're in Montreal having Tim Hortons.
No, that's interesting. I think, we all had that, the Ringo effect. I had the same thing, as you. What launched us? I remember that Sunday night on the Ed Sullivan Show, and this story comes up all the time. You're sitting there watching the Beatles come out of nowhere for us, and suddenly the next morning we all show up to school, and we're all musicians, and you're the drummer, and nobody had ever had any experience or anything. Like, so how did that happen? Completely changed the universe.
Now I'm 63, so I was 64. I would have been 5. How old are you, Aldo? Close to mine?
I'm close.
Are you one of those guys that don't tell his age?
Well, I can't, after a while, you can't count anymore,
Ringo's 82, man. Come on. He's the healthiest guy I know. You're
Okay.
61.
Thank you.
Okay. When you're 64.
Okay, when I'm 64, well, I passed out once. So how's this? Listen, since you brought it up, and it's really amazing. Like I was telling you when we were texting about this, the fact that Mick Jagger, Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, all of these people, you look at the numbers and you say, it doesn't make sense. They look great. They feel great. They're like pushing it for us, not just for themselves. They're
Ringo
doing it
says
for
he's
us.
still 25 up here,
And we all are, right?
Yeah.
So when somebody asks me my age, I have to think twice because I forget.
There you go. That's a good answer. I thought you were
No,
one of those guys that wouldn't tell us people his age because
no, if you really want me to tell you, I will, but I forget and I have to think back because the numbers don't really make any sense.
that's okay. Well, Ringo's 82 and he's
82,
got ripped
amazing.
abs and cut arms and he exercises. I'm sure he's in the gym right now and he eats so healthy and he really is about peace and love, Aldo. He's one of those guys that just lives it. He doesn't stress about what's coming tomorrow or what happened yesterday. He's just in the moment. Right now, I'm talking to my friend Aldo, and even though we're on Zoom, we're looking each other in the eyes. He's got way cooler glasses, but we're in the moment, man, and love. One of my favorite. You want to hear my favorite press roll ever in history? Okay, this is my favorite press roll ever, and it has to do with Canada, Montreal, and the Beatles. Can you guess what that is?
All you need is love.
Yes. Brrr, ba, 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 ba. Very good. You passed the Beatle test.
Listen, I used to do, I like you. It's funny that you mentioned it, but I used to do this clinic presentation called "Explaining Ringo," because
Wow. Tell me
because I
about that.
well, I used to get really annoyed at people who say, "Oh, Ringo, that he was just lucky."
No,
And of course, then maybe they would say it to get my goat. I say, you have no idea how brilliant that is. The whole orchestration, every note. If you change the drum part, it's like changing the words to the song.
absolutely.
And so I would explain it and get into these hot debates with people. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna do it publicly because I'm a Ludwig endorser. So I played a kit with the Ringo setup, and explain how's this, how's that, how did he come up with this? And then I remember you and I had this conversation. I said, there's one that was really stumping me, and you know which one I'm gonna say. Uh, dun dun da da dum. So I always thought dun dun da da da. He was going from the top tom to the lower one, and then you told me, no, he's going from the bottom up.
Can I talk about that for a minute? Okay, because that is such a debate among drummers around the world. When you really listen, as you did with your headphones, you can swear it's going high to low. It just sounds high to low. But Ringo, I mean, there were no video cameras there. We didn't have video cameras. No one was filming that session. He swears by the fact that he played left lead starting on his floor tom. He had 3 toms at the time, just like in the Get Back movie. George Harrison had bought him a Hollywood Ludwig blonde maple kit. So he went from the Black Oyster Pearl 4-piece to a 5-piece with an extra tom. So he says he didn't tell me the sticking, but he showed me, even though he was on a 4-piece kit, he showed me left, right on the floor tom. It sure sounds to me like it's going low. So I just hosted his masterclass on masterclass.com. If any of you drummers don't have masterclass, I think it's like $15 a month, but watch the Ringo Starr masterclass. It's an hour and a half. I came up with like 200 questions. He said okay to all of them, and he was great with it. And so he and we did that talk where we said, let's talk about come together. Let's talk about tomorrow never knows. Let's talk about, how you lead left. And he started. So we also did a thing for World Hunger called Drum Together. I think there was like 104 drummers on it. So I got an extra tom on my 4-piece kit. I tuned my floor tom, Aldo, high. I tuned my middle tom medium and my high tom low. So even though I was going floor tom to high racked up, it sounded like tuku 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 tuku. So I did that on that. Look up Why Hunger Drum Together. Dom Famularo put that together, our dear friend Dom. And so anyway, on Masterclass, I had a 4-piece kit and I kind of went down. But most of us, we grew up thinking it was ding ding ticka 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 but I know he leads left. He's 5 feet away from me every night. He leads left. And so it makes sense that he started low and went high. But it is kind of a debate. There's another debate because Paul McCartney, Ringo quit for about a week during the White Album, and Paul played drums on back in the USSR, and they say he played drums on Dear Prudence. But if you listen to the end of Dear Prudence, it sure sounds like Ringo. So there's a lot of rumors that say that Ringo, when he came back, he added his drum kind of thing, because the end of Dear Prudence is kind of a drum solo. And I was playing it for Ringo the other day, and he wasn't exactly sure, but he says, yeah, that sounds like me on the end there. So anyway, don't get me talking or I'll never stop.
No, but it's interesting. I mean, there's another one, and when they released the film about that whole
Get back.
Get Back, yeah, and I'm thinking, okay, now we're going to find out two things. Was somebody telling Ringo or suggesting to Ringo what to play? And then how did he come up with that part? Because it has always been a big mystery for me personally. And I know this comes up in conversations.
Yeah.
So
fact,
So wait, Greg, before you answer that. So I am watching that whole thing, waiting to see that progress, because you see the progress of the songs, right? But we missed that one. All of a sudden, he's playing the part. And I'm saying, I'll never know.
Ringo wasn't super happy with the original Let It Be album that came out, while the Beatles were breaking up and stuff, because it made it look like they were not really close. And he said, we were laughing all the time. We loved each other. We were so close. Yeah, the band was winding down and we kind of knew it. But when Peter Jackson got a hold of 8 hours of film and he put out Get Back, it just shows how joyous it was and how fun it was. But Ringo told me he was really hoping that in watching the Peter Jackson sifting through 8 hours of film, he would see the moment where he went from Jojo was a man to he said, but he never saw that progress. He never saw that moment where he went, I'm going to do this. Paul has his Hofner and he's going while he's writing the song, but Ringo didn't find that defining moment. It's got to be somewhere, maybe in the footage that wasn't, used, because there's a lot more that wasn't really used, but there's still 8 hours. That's a lot. So somehow, there's probably a bit of film where he does that. But he even said, I didn't see it in Get Back, but he loved Get Back.
That was nice. I think, judging from, you had sent me this clip of an interview that he did when he kind of talked about that. And it seemed to me, just from what Ringo said, that he decided when they're on the rooftop recording that that's what he was going to do.
That's right. That's right.
Is that what happened?
That's what he says happened. He says he doesn't like, okay, so he's playing the regular rock beat, and then he's on the roof, he's going, he doesn't know where, maybe in the, studio or wherever it was before they went on the roof. He doesn't know when it happened, but it happened. And one of the coolest things too is the Beatles used to always, at Abbey Road, they would always go into the cafeteria and they would be having tea. And the ladies that cleaned and dried the tea towels, that cleaned and dried the teacups and saucers, they used these white tea towels with these red stripes. So he would take those and put them on his drums. And that's in the master class. Gary Astridge, the biggest authority on Ringo's drum kits. He has RingoStarDrumKits.com. Gary's wonderful. He lives in Buffalo, New York. He helps Ringo with and Jeff Chonis, Ringo and my drum tech, with the Grammy Museum, with all the parts to all the Ringo drum sets. He sent me a set of tea towels and we used it in the Ringo Masterclass on masterclass.com. But if you look on the roof, he's got one tea towel on his snare, one tea towel on his floor. And that really has a lot to do with his sound. Ringo calls himself, I'm the tea towel guy, because he kind of came up with that concept.
Yeah, it changed everything. I mean, when I say change everything, even in creating parts that are like forever etched in stone, that's amazing. I mean, that whole thing, watching that whole progress. And I mean, he was every time you do a song, and I'm sure you have this experience, whether I'm playing percussion or especially drums, if they don't say Steve Gadd, it's Ringo Starr, because you're defining the song, you're defining something very specific, and it takes really a lot to get it to that point. It's amazing.
Yeah, the names I get thrown at me a lot when I'm recording, because I tell my students, I have a drum class on drumchannel.com. If you can check that out. I also do FaceTime lessons from a studio in Woodland Hill in Sherman Oaks, California. And if anybody wants to do FaceTime lessons with me or Zoom lessons, they can just send an email to Frank. He runs all that for me. At Gregg, Gregg, drums, DRUMS, the number 2 at gmail.com. GreggDrums2 at gmail.com. And if they want lessons, they can do that. If they want me to play on their songs, they can do that. And the number one name I get when people say, could you do a kind of a Ringo fill? Or they'll say, this is a real heavy vibe, like a Bonham vibe. Or this is kind of like, if it's a jazz thing, a lot of people reference the great Steve Gadd on Asia. Throw in some of those Asia fills. So those are and Jeff Porcaro. Can you do kind of a shuffle, kind of like a Rosanna-y kind of thing? Those seem to be the 4 names, at least with me, that come up a lot. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's those, and when I on drums, yeah, those are, and Bernard Purdie, of course.
Yeah, and also with jazz, don't they always say this is kind of an Elvin thing? Don't you get that a lot?
Elvin or Tony.
Or go for it. There's a solo here, a lot of flams, blah, 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 kind of a Tony thing, Tony Williams thing, right? Those are the big, or Buddy Rich. This one's big band, but really kick the band, really set it up, go for it, really make it a barn burner, like Buddy Rich, or Krupa. Gene Krupa really set the stage for the modern day drum solo and Sing, Sing, Sing with Benny Goodman. Gene was so great. I met Gene when I was about 13 years old. My dad, his sax player, the one we were talking about that had the junior high teaching gig, he hosted the Benny Goodman reunion group in Detroit. Benny Goodman and Gene Krupa playing, and they had a party in a basement. And my dad went over to Gene and he found a photographer that was there. And he said, Gene, would you take a picture with my son? He's 13 years old and he loves you. He loves the drums. He said, sure, bring him over. He put his arm around me. And before the guy shot the picture, Gene Krupa was so cool. He opened up the lapel of his blazer so that on his pocket, the GK Gene Krupa band crest logo would show. That's the kind of guy he was, man. And Louis Belson's another one. Louis Belson was one of my best friends. He was at my wedding. He was at my parents' funeral. I was a pallbearer at his wedding. Louis Belson, man, so positive. The glass was never half empty with Louis. It was always half full.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing him once. I was at a big stage band camp, and he played with his band there. And it was the first time I had ever seen him play. I'd seen Buddy play many, many times, and of course, he's just incredible. But Louis Belson really hit me in that the intensity that he could play at such low volumes, but still keep it like so musical, so intense, and so together, like a classical player from top to bottom, whatever the dynamic happened to be. And of course, the gentleman he was, and he always, and I spoke to him just a little bit, and he said, if I can give you some advice apart from the musical, never speak a negative word if you can help it. Never say anything bad about anybody. Just do what you got to do and be positive.
That's Louis. That's Louis. I told him once, I said, man, I read a quote where Duke Ellington said you were his favorite drummer. And he said, well, Duke was drinking a lot in those days. That's how Louis could deflect. He could deflect. There's a lot of people that want to, oh, it's about me. The drumming's about me. The personality's about me. Louis would always deflect. Yeah, well, Duke was drinking a lot in those days. And one time, there was a drummer who will remain nameless, and he was headlining this event. And No, Louis was headlining the event, but before him, this really fantastic drummer with lots of chops and showmanship went on. And I said, "Wow, Louis, you're going to kill it." He goes, "Man, that's a tough act to follow." He said, "Duke Ellington," he would reference Duke a lot. He said, "Duke Ellington told me never follow a kid or a dog act."
Oh, ouch. Yeah. No, I think at some point, if one learns, you take what you do seriously, but you don't take yourself seriously. We're
That's right.
fortunate to be able to do this. I mean, how great is it that we can play music? I mean, look, look what we're doing. Greg, this is amazing. What an amazing gift.
Aldo, I tell people all the time, especially students, I love to teach. And I tell students, I've never done anything for my income, because we all have to make money, but play the drums. And I said, that goes for playing live shows, touring, playing recording sessions, doing videos, the drum channel, teaching, doing clinics. But I've got the sticks in my hand and I'm playing. I said, I don't work. I said, I get paid to play the drums, but I don't work. The work is when you show up at the airport and your flight's canceled, or you get to the hotel. Oh, we don't have any rooms until 5. Well, I haven't been to bed yet. Can I take a nap? No. That's the work. But playing the drums, that is not work. That's what we would do anyway if we weren't being paid for it, right?
Exactly. But talking about the work, I mean, obviously the work is in preparation. You have to practice, you have to study. So getting those gigs or being recommended, I mean, Van Halen, I mean, you did Santana. I think you did something with Paul Anka, right?
Oh yeah, I did a couple albums with Paul Anka.
You
In
know, he's
fact,
Canadian from Ottawa, where I grew up.
is he Ottawa? I know Graham Lear was the drummer live, and I was doing this album because this guy Humberto Gatica, I was on his roster of session drummers. So I thought to myself, why aren't they having Graham Lear do this? And Humberto told me that Paul Anka listens to whoever's producing and wants his drummers. I think John Robinson had done some stuff. And anyway, he has his sessions and he has his live bands. But now it's a little bit of a different thing, I think, with sessions. I think a lot of the live drummers should be the people that play on the albums. But you mentioned the work and the practice.
Yes. So what took you there? Let's say you studied drums, of course,
Yeah,
and then
well,
what took you in that path?
there are a few things that I'd like to equate to practicing, because to me, practicing is also not really work. You're still holding your sticks and you're playing the drums. But the work for me was, I remember my mom was so amazing. She would always drive me to my lessons. And I just wanted to play with headphones. I wanted to play along with Buddy Rich songs, with Chicago, Danny Seraphin, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Bobby Colomby, Ringo, the Beatles, the Guess Who. I wanted to play with Alice Cooper records. I wanted to play the songs, my 45s. And my teacher told my mom one time, he said, "Mrs. Bissonette, we're going to have to work on Greg because he's not practicing the things that I want him to practice." She said, "Well, he plays all the time." He said, "Well, it sounds like he's got a really good groove and he knows a lot of songs, but I want him to work on these books." And there's a blue one. It's called Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer by Jim Chapin. She said, "Yeah, I talked to him about that. He doesn't really enjoy that." He said, "Well, he's got to practice it. He's got to practice that gray book by George Lawrence Stone called Stick Control." She said, "Yeah, he bangs on the dashboard to these stickings before the lesson." But I asked him, "Is this the only time all week you've done that?" So he had a little powwow with my mom in front of me. And he said, "Mrs. Bissonette, we're going to have to stop the lessons because Greg's not practicing the things I want him to practice." And my mom said, "Greg, I'm paying $6 a half an hour for lessons. We're going to have to stop unless you practice that blue book. Ding, ding, da ding, chick, da ding, chick, da ding, chick, ba, 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 ba." And I'm like, I don't like math. I don't like algebra. I don't like geometry. And I don't like that Jim Chapin book because it's hard. But I practiced it because of my mom and because of my teacher, Myra McDonald. And when I got to North Texas, one of the auditions, play the last page of the Chapin book as fast as you can. Okay. Ding, 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 ba 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 bo, ba 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 bo, ba 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 bo, ba ba bo, ba 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 bo, ba tika tika go. And I could do it because my mom made me practice it. And so that was the work, Aldo. That was the work because I didn't enjoy the Chapin book, but I had to do it. Now I love it because I can do it, you know.
Right. And it's interesting because one thing that comes up is you played along with records most of your music life in preparation. And
That's
this is
how
a
I learned to play.
yeah, so this is a subject that's come up. I mean, that's how I started before I got like really serious. And then I said, okay, I have to learn this and I have to learn that. And then, of course, we'd have all the guys like Jim Chapin at COSA. So we could like sit with for them all week and you and like everybody who came. So now finally we gathered. It was like the great gathering of all the great minds for a week and pick
It was a
everybody's
blo-
brains.
That was so much fun. I got to meet Mike Clark there, and we've become great friends. So many great drummers. COSA is such an amazing international event that you do, Aldo. And I just have to say, in teaching, one of my gripes is, kids. I mean, it's hard enough right now because drum sales, guitar sales, bass sales, trumpet sales are flat. The NAMM show is struggling. Music merchandising is struggling. They're just not selling. It's flat. We need another Beatles. That was the boom that got Aldo playing Ludwig, that got kids playing Rickenbackers and Marshall amps and Vox amps. And now kids would rather play video games. They'd rather play Call of Duty. So we need something to excite people. And what really excites drum students that I have is you put on headphones, they put on headphones. I have 2 drum sets. You play to their favorite songs. You say, who's your favorite band? What are your favorite songs? And you pull it up on YouTube because we can, and you play along with that. And they're smiling and they're playing and they're happy and they can't wait to come back next week. If you want a student to stop playing drums, as much as I love stick control and as much as I love Joe Morello, rudimental jazz and rock and bass drum and Carmine Appice, realistic rock and advanced techniques for the modern drum, you put a book in front of them and you say, okay, no more music. We're just going to look at this exercise and we're going to work on rudiments. And you got a pad for the first 6 months, no drum set. They're going to quit. And Ringo says, he told his grandkid, you're taking lessons? What are they doing? Well, they're making me play on a pad and not the drum set. He said, stop the lessons. Put on your headphones and play the drums. Play with other musicians. Bring a bass player over and play. So many drummers these days, they can play to YouTube and they can do copies of covers of songs, but they don't play with real musicians. You have to play with a bass player that's alive, that has a pulse, because they're going to speed up and slow down. Guitar players, piano players, trumpet players, sax players, piano players, singers. You need to get the tempo and hold it. And you're not going to get that from playing with a metronome, although you need to play with a metronome. You're not going to get that from following YouTube. You got to play and be the drummer that holds the groove, because that's the number one thing a drummer has to do, is pick the tempo and hold the tempo. The drummer is also in charge, like you said with Louis, of the dynamics. So we're in charge of the tempo, starting the song at the right tempo, keeping it there all the way through, and the dynamics. When a verse is down, when a B section's up, when a chorus is big, when the solo is the biggest, and the verse is down. And then you go to halftime, and you have to keep the tempo the same when you go to halftime. So many drummers, they go to halftime and they slow the groove down so much that when they go back to regular time, it's all whacked out. Double time. Don't speed it up when you go to double time. Just play double time. Then regular time. Halftime. And that stuff you can get with playing with the metronome. But when you play with a live band, record yourself so you can see, wow, when I went to double time, I really dragged. When I went to double time, I really rushed. Record yourself and listen back. Music. I think drummers will get excited. Drum students will get excited when they play music, not on a pad with sticks, although we need that. We need to hold the sticks correctly. We need to have different rudiments and different things, but we got to play music first. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, this has been a common theme, and many of the guys I've had on the show, and they all say the same thing. I mean, it was my experience. I started that way. It's like when you grow up. First, you speak, and then you go to school to learn to read and write. But there's a big period between there. Same thing with music. You're listening to. I mean, I remember listening to the Beatles. Dino Danelli was one of my favorite drummers. I used
The
to
Rascals.
Yes, I used to emulate them, but I used to play to all the songs, and so by the time I was probably 16, I was playing with a lot of cover bands, a lot of the local bands, just because I knew the songs.
Would you
You
do a
know,
lot of Rascals and Beatles and Zeppelin? What would a set list be like in that band?
Not Emerson, Lake and Palmer so much. Um, Down in the Bayou, what was that band?
Creedence Clearwater Revival,
Creedence Clearwater, The Doors,
The Doors,
Jimi Hendrix. So it was,
Jimmy Mitch Mitchell.
yeah. So, learning something new would come out because, in those days when I was a teenager, every week there's a new band and different. Would be Yes, then Gentle
Yes.
Giant, and then Frank Zappa.
Oh. What about Chicago and Blood, Sweat,
Chicago.
Tears and horn bands?
And I saw them all live, by the way. So when I speak to Danny, I say, I saw you live, or Bobby Colombi, and you sing these people live. And then I would see Weather Report with
Oh.
Alphonse Mozon and Ayrto in a small, tiny club. And I was just soaking it up. I mean, I didn't really know what they were doing, but, it remained there. So later I'd figure it out.
Wow. My
But it's
daughter is singing the national anthem right now for the Woo Sox, the Red Sox AAA MLB baseball team. And so I just texted back, I'm so proud of you, Mary. My daughter, Mary, is 21. She goes to the Berklee College of Music. My son, Noah, is 24. He's a big shot in the car industry in LA and realtor in LA. And I'm so proud of them both. So, and my brother's playing bass with Elton John. They played last night where the Washington Nationals play baseball at the stadium, and they're playing at Dodger Stadium. And my sister Kathy and I are going to see my brother play bass with Elton John at Dodger Stadium November 19th. What an honor.
beautiful. I mean, you have a whole musical family, and your whole just a little bit. I mean, we could talk for a week, but I won't keep you for a week. You have stuff to do, but I mean, you've played with Engelbert Humperdinck, Steve Vai, Lou Rawls,
We
right?
did a Lou Rawls Christmas album. Boy, was that fun.
Yeah, one of my favorites. And the Doobie Brothers, Keith Emerson. Did you do something with Keith?
Yeah, I played a lot with Keith. Mark Bonilla, my dear friend, was Keith's singer and guitar player towards the end. And I've done a lot of albums and live shows with Keith Emerson and Mark Bonilla. Jeff Lynne and ELO. My brother and I played with Jeff Lynne and ELO. And you mentioned Santana. I got to record on the Supernatural album, one song. And James
Great album.
Taylor,
Great album.
got to work quite a bit live with James Taylor. Joe Satriani, a lot of gigs up in Canada with Joe Satriani, a lot of David Lee Roth shows in Canada, lots of Ringo shows in Canada. And with Spinal Tap, I get to be the drummer. The original drummer with Spinal Tap just passed away in this past year. But I've gotten to do, because of my good friend CJ Vanston, the keyboard player and musical director, a lot of Spinal Tap shows, and the movies, like Christopher Guest's movies, Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman, The Mighty Wind, For Your Consideration, and that whole cast of great actors and comedians that Christopher Guest has. So many cool bands and so many great artists. And boy, I'm in a band called Bass Extremes with Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey, and we just did an album. And on the album is Marcus Miller, Ron Carter, Billy Sheehan, John Petitucci, so many great bass players. And I toured a lot. I've been touring a lot with them too. But I have to say, the greatest, most fun gig is the last 19 years getting to play double drums with Ringo. He's just not only my hero on drums, but he's the coolest guy and a dear, dear friend.
Nice.
And you're coming to the gig tomorrow.
Yes, I'm going to be. I've seen you guys before. I've seen it when Sheila. I saw Ringo with Sheila playing years
I don't
ago.
wear high heel shoes. She does.
Well,
So you won't see any high heel shoes.
But I mean, the band always sounds great. I mean,
He's one of my favorite drummers,
yeah.
man. That drum solo. Edgar Winter made a great comment about Sheila last night on the plane. He said he was in the band with Sheila, and he said every single night her drum solo would be completely different. She would just, it's like having sushi and you have the ginger in between the sushi to cleanse your palate. The next night, the palate was clean. She'd do something completely different. You'll hear what I'm doing tomorrow, but I'm kind of going at my drum solo in Frankenstein, Edgar Winter, Frankenstein, like a classic rock beat, greatest hits thing. I'll do Mitch Mitchell, Manic Depression, YYZ, Canadian Rush, ba 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 ba, the Neil Peart lick. I'll do Come Together, Tomorrow Never Knows, Ticket to Ride, The End from Ringo, honoring Ringo, pointing over to Ringo. Charlie Watts, The Cowbell Honky Tonk Woman, a lot of John Bonham, Immigrant Song, The Fool in the Rain, When the Levee Breaks, Wipeout, do Wipeout, Gene Krupa, Sing, 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 Hot for Teacher, Alex Van Halen, one of my favorite drummers. So I kind of make it like a name that tune for the audience.
Nice, nice. So here's a sum it up, if you let me. To be a successful, a person who's achieves happiness doing what they do, much like Ringo and all of those people.
Right there, that's the definition of success. It's not what gig do you have. It's not, oh, I didn't get this, I'm a failure. No, a failure is someone that stops trying. That's when you fail. If you don't get a gig or you don't do well, you're not a failure. You just didn't do well on that. You keep getting better and better and better. Failure is when you stop. But what did you just say? Someone that has fun doing what they do? What did you say?
Yes, have fun what they do and achieve happiness doing what they love best.
That's
right?
success.
And I mean, so the ingredients also, I mean, just being a good person, just being a good person and giving, just bring to the table, right? And you do it all the time.
Well, I'm a Christian man, and I've always been a kind of a Bible reader and a guy that loves, I'm not any one religion. I'm a follower of Jesus. And
spiritual. Yeah, I mean, it's a spiritual.
Jesus, he says, be a light. Try to lift people up. I look at you, I look at Dom Famularo, I look at Louis Bellson, I look at Ringo. My heroes, they're lights. You would never put a blanket over a lamp. You would let the light shine, and your light shines, Aldo. And when you teach and when you play and you're smiling, that is giving. That's giving to the world. I know how much it really bothered Ringo that for the last 2.5 years, we couldn't go on the road. And he was so excited. The people that are holding tickets for our 2020 show held them to 2021. And then it was delayed and postponed until 2022. And then it was two of the guys, Edgar Winter and Steve Lukather, tested positive. So Ringo and I and the rest of the band, we came home in June. So now we're out here again, and we're in a real strong COVID bubble. But he just wants to play in front of people. He wants to give people that joy. And people show up and they got Sgt. Pepper suits and yellow submarines and peace and love. And he gets so much joy from the audience because he's a light and you're a light.
Thank you, Gregg, and I think that's super important. And also, I mean, there's the other side where you build repertoire, playing along with those songs, knowing what the material is, because you can't talk about a subject unless you've read about it, you've explored it, and then you can internalize it, right? So all those songs that you played, now you can play.
I have students that have come to me in the past, and some of them that are just complete rock only guys. They say, I want to play jazz. I say, oh, great. Do you like jazz? Have you listened to Weather Report, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, John Coltrane? No. Do you listen to jazz? No. Well, then that's the first thing you have to do is you have to listen to it and you have to like it, and then you'll be able to play it better. I've had jazz aficionados come to my drum studio and say, I want to play rock. And I said, well, okay, do you listen to or do you like Led Zeppelin, the Foo Fighters, the Chili Peppers, Queen, the Beatles, Aerosmith, Rolling Stones? Nah. Do you like that kind of music? Not so much. Well, if you don't like it, why do you want to play rock? Well, I hear that rock tours pay a lot more than jazz tours. That's why you want to play rock?
Yeah.
right? You've
Yeah.
experienced that, right?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. No, you really have to be true to yourself and finding yourself and building yourself. I mean, you're building your house, right? So you want to have the best house where people would like to come to and enjoy visiting. And it's nice to visit, right? And you can share it. And I mean, that's what you're doing. You're building yourself.
You're building your house and build it on a firm foundation. Rudiments are a firm foundation. That's not the way to get a young student inspired to play drums. Let them play. Let them have fun. Let them hear the cymbals and the toms and the bass drum. And wow, man. And let them play along with music. Even if it's not in time, they're not failing. They're just learning to do it better. And then say, okay, now let's work on a thing called a 5-stroke roll. Mama, daddy, bop. And then with the left hand, da, 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 and a 7 and a 9 and a paradiddle and a paradiddle little and a petaflop. Only when you sprinkle in the rudimental stuff to their playing and having fun. Here's how Mitch Mitchell did a 6-stroke roll. Manic depression. If you let music be what excites the drummer, then they can dig deep into the foundation, into the rudiments, but let the music be the foundation that they build their house, like you just said.
Yeah. No, very well said, Greg. Yeah. And I mean, there's so much to learn, so much to do. And, it's waking up every day and looking forward to doing it, right?
Right.
And the other thing too is, I mean, obviously we have to take care of our health, mental and physical. Without that,
Absolutely.
that's a challenge when you have to show up.
I'm getting ready to watch my favorite baseball team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, last night on YouTube highlights and ride that exercise bike in the gym for 45 minutes and then try to eat healthy and eating right and exercise and just positive. There's a book by Norman Vincent Peale called The Power of Positive Thinking. Just being positive, being an optimist. So many people are, there's Eeyore and then there's Winnie the Pooh. And Winnie the Pooh's an optimist and Eeyore is negative. Don't be an Eeyore.
Yeah, I used to be. This is the Optimist Club. I used to be president of an Optimist Club, so
I know about the
I'm an
optimist.
optimist. So any thoughts on Winnie the Pooh? You
Yeah,
say?
years ago, I was playing drums on with my brother, playing bass on the end credits of Finding Nemo, and it was Bobby Darin's big band piece, Somewhere Beyond the Sea, and my chart didn't have two important things: a DS sign and a coda. Again, this is musical terms for you drummers that don't read, but anyway, my brother was following the form, and I said, "Hey, Matt, I don't have a DS or a coda. Something's up with my chart." And a talkback mic came on, and somebody in the control room said, "Drummer, please come into the control room." I said, "I'm going to bring my chart and show them. I don't have a DS. I don't have a coda." And I said, "So," and they said, "No, say what you just said to your brother." I said, "Well, I said, I don't have a DS." And they said, "Right there, that rasp. We need somebody, a B guy. We have an A guy. We need a B guy to do the voice of Winnie the Pooh for Disney." And so from doing that, I get to do kind of the B stuff for Winnie the Pooh. Jim Cummings is the guy that does the main stuff. Sterling Holloway is the one that Walt Disney handpicked in 1968 to do the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. But when Sterling passed away in 81, Jim Cummings got the gig. But when he needs a sub, I get to do the B stuff that he can't do. Oh, bother. Aldo, what is a drum set? And does it come with a small smackerel of honey? Oh, bother. Oh, bother. 100-acre wood. Yeah, be an optimist like Winnie. Don't be a pessimist.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I mean, what I mean, the message that we're also, I mean, that I always think about is, and we should be part of this. And I say to my students, you should always be part of somebody else's success, opening doors, suggesting. So obviously, we can't do these things by ourselves. But you're the person that's on that path. People open doors for you. You do something that people hear, and you have to show up, and you have to be there 100%. And all of a sudden, I mean, if we look at your discography, if we look at, and people like you, it's the same story. They did something really well and they work work they play, and they're dedicated to being really good at what does it take, and being good people. And then doors open. It's magic, right?
Yeah, and it's about making choices. There's a couple of doors. You can make this left turn that's not a good choice that will lead you down a dark path, or you can make a right turn. And that right turn, the choices that we're given every single day, thousands of choices throughout maybe the 12 hours, 16, 18 hours, 20 hours that we're awake. There are so many choices that we need to make subconsciously, consciously every day. And in your career, in your practicing, the people you associate with, the way you take care of your body and mind, and the way you treat people, choices and the doors. That's really great that you mentioned open doors, revolving doors. Yeah,
Sure. No,
sliding doors.
it's about shaping your journey. You're in charge, right, Greg? I mean, you're in charge of shaping your journey. And if sometimes you make a decision, and sometimes it was a bad decision, but the fact that you took that decision taught you something, so it wasn't really a mistake. You needed to learn that to then go on and turn the other way. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. I don't personally think that I'm totally in charge. I pray constantly. I'm always asking for God's help. And I think that God gave me a lot of talent to play drums, to make good decisions. But I'm always praying, like, God, help me. I pray a lot, and I kind of sit back and I listen a lot. Like, what should I do? What does God want me to do right here? Because there's definitely choices. From the time I was a kid, and I always had my dreams, but I never felt like I had to go it alone. But yeah, make the right choices, kids and adults. We all have to make choices all the time.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's interesting that you say the word pray, because whether you're meditating or praying, I mean, there's this thing about a direct line, and the answer will come to you. I mean, often at night I say to myself, I got to resolve this. Now, what would I do? What shall I do?
yeah.
This is, or what's the answer to this puzzle, or whatever it is. You let it rest, and it's funny, it comes to you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
If you ask,
All the time. It will be open. If you knock, it will be open. If you ask,
it's
exactly.
amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so glad we're on the same wavelength, that we're getting to say this on your great. Would you call it a podcast or a
Yeah,
webinar?
it's a podcast. It's on YouTube, and also on all platforms, audio platforms.
Beautiful.
And I, for me, it took me a year to put this together, because I wanted to, you're a point in your life where you know enough people who will take you seriously, and accept being on the show, and have this conversation.
So it's audio. It's not like a YouTube channel, right?
Also,
it's audio only.
Yeah. Also,
Nobody
YouTube.
can see your cool blue glasses.
Oh yes, YouTube.
Oh, it's on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel. Oh, okay.
All platforms, audio and YouTube.
So it's not really a podcast. You're a YouTuber. I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
I
very
call it
good.
podcast, but it's a YouTube, which is available, YouTube video, but which is also available on audio platform.
You know who my favorite YouTuber is? He's got 3 million subscribers.
I know.
Ricardo.
He's one of my favorites too.
He's a genius.
He's brilliant.
He's
totally
a
agree.
doctorate degree theory guy, great guitar player, knows so much about drums. I did a thing where we did the top beats from 1935 to now.
I saw that. It was great.
He's a Beatle fanatic like we are. He breaks down I Am the Walrus. Yeah, but I hope you have great success with your YouTube channel, Aldo.
It takes time, but for me, it was important to say it like this, not smoke and mirrors, and have a real conversation. And Rick is doing it in a nice way too. He's educating while he's expanding everybody's world, and that's what it's about, as far as I'm concerned.
And he doesn't cuss on there. He keeps things really for everyone. When you watch TV as a kid, when we watched the Ed Sullivan Show, there weren't people on there cussing and sexual stuff. It was just, stuff that everybody, your kids, people say, well, this is PG, or this is mature audiences. This video game has people being killed and blood splattering on the screen. It's for mature audiences. What's mature about that? That's like immature.
Yeah.
So Rick and you and I think, are all on the same page. He's a great guy and a real people guy. And
I would love to have
he's
him
not-
on my podcast one day. I really respect what he does. He's great.
Well, this was a lot of fun, Aldo. Thank you very, very much.
And Greg, to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope you have a fun time tomorrow night.
Thank you.